Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out today. Today, Westport will join communities around the state and the country in a public reading of the Declaration of Independence to celebrate the 250th anniversary of the birth of America. The Declaration of Independence was signed on July 3rd in Philadelphia, and on July 4th, it was read to the public for the first time. After that reading, printed copies were distributed, and it was read publicly on July 8th in cities and towns across the 13 newly declared colonies, the United States of America. What will be read is the original document as it was written in 1776. Some of the terms may not fit our 2026 context and could seem a little troubling, and at the end of the reading, we will have a discussion led by Ramin Gunnersham, director of the Westport Museum, to put some of the ideas and words back into context. Today's readers are Westport First Selectman Kevin Christie, Westport Museum for History and Culture Director Ramin Gunnersham, RTM moderator Jeff Weiser, America 250 committee member, artist and designer of the Westport 250 logo, Miggs Burrows, America 250 committee member and chapter regent of the DAR Drumhill chapter, Kelly Rudin, and Roger Sherman Branch Sons of the American Revolution President, Robert Clark. Our community, because they're going to be reading some really weird words. Westport 250, the community partners for today are the Westport 250 Committee, the Connecticut Sons of the American Revolution, who provided the gift of the facsimile of the Declaration of Independence that will be gifted to the town, the National Society Daughters of the American Revolution Drumhill chapter, who generously framed that declaration, and the Westport Museum for History and Culture. And without further ado, here it is.
In Congress, July 4th, 1776, the unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America, when in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with one another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them. A decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation.
We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness.
Prudence, indeed, will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes. And accordingly, all experience hath shewn that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable, than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government. The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over the states. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world.
He has refused his assent to laws the most wholesome and necessary for the public good.
He has forbidden his governors to pass laws of immediate and pressing importance unless suspended in their operation till his assent should be obtained. And when so suspended, he has utterly neglected to attend to them.
He has refused to pass other laws for the accommodation of large districts of people unless those people would relinquish the right of representation in the legislature, a right inestimable to them and formidable to tyrants only.
He has called together legislative bodies at places unusual, uncomfortable, and distant from the depository of their public records for the sole purpose of fatiguing them into compliance with his measures.
He has dissolved representative houses repeatedly for opposing with manly firmness his invasions on the rights of the people.
He has refused for a long time after such dissolutions to cause others to be elected, whereby the legislative powers, incapable of annihilation, have returned to the people at large for their exercise, the state remaining in the meantime exposed to all the dangers from invasions from without and convulsions within.
He has endeavored to prevent the population of these states for that purpose, obstructing the laws for naturalization of foreigners, refusing to pass others to encourage their migrations hither, and raising the conditions of new appropriations of lands.
He has obstructed the administration of justice by refusing his assent to laws for establishing judiciary powers.
He has made the judges dependent on his will alone for the tenure of their offices and the amount and payment of their salaries.
He has erected a multitude of new offices and sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people and eat out their substance.
He has kept among us in times of peace standing armies without the consent of our legislatures.
He has affected to render the military independent of and superior to the civil power.
He has combined with others to subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution and unacknowledged by our laws, giving his assent to their acts of pretended legislation.
For quartering large bodies of armed troops among us.
For protecting them by mock trial from punishment for any murders which they should commit on the inhabitants of these states.
For cutting off our trade with all parts of the world.
For imposing taxes on us without our consent.
For depriving us in many cases the benefits of trial by jury.
For transporting us beyond seas to be tried for pretended offenses.
For abolishing the free system of English laws in a neighboring province, establishing therein an arbitrary government and enlarging its boundaries so as to render it once an example and fit instruments for introducing the same absolute rule into these colonies.
For taking away our charters, abolishing our most valuable laws, and altering fundamentally the forms of our governments.
For suspending our own legislatures and declaring themselves invested with power to legislate for us in all cases whatsoever.
He has abdicated government here by declaring us out of his protection and waging war against us.
He has plundered our seas, ravaged our coasts, burnt our towns, and destroyed the lives of our people.
He is at this time transporting large armies of foreign mercenaries to complete the works of death, desolation, and tyranny already begun by circumstances of cruelty and perfidy scarcely paralleled in the most barbarous ages and totally unworthy the head of a civilized nation.
He has constrained our fellow citizens taken captive on the high seas to bear arms against their country, to become the executioners of their friends and brethren, or to fall themselves by their hands.
He has excited domestic insurrections among us and has endeavored to bring on the inhabitants of our frontiers, the merciless Indian savages whose known rule of warfare is an undistinguished destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions.
In every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress in the most humble terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury. A prince whose character is thus marked. Oh, sorry. Sorry, folks. All right, all right. In every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress in the most humble terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury. A prince whose character is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant is unfit to be the ruler of a free people.
Nor have we been wanting in our attentions to our British brethren. We have warned them from time to time of attempts by their legislature to extend an unwarrantable jurisdiction over us. We have reminded them of the circumstances of our emigration and settlement here. We have appealed to their native justice and magnanimity and have conjured them by the ties of our common kindred to disavow these usurpations, which would inevitably interrupt our connections and correspondence. They too have been deaf to the voice of justice and of consanguinity. We must therefore acquiesce in the necessity which denounces our separation and hold them as we hold the rest of mankind, enemies in war, in peace, friends.
We, therefore, the representatives of the United States of America in General Congress, assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions, do, in the name and by authority of the good people of these colonies, solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are, and of right, ought to be free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved. And that as free and independent states, they have full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and to do all other acts and things which independent states may of right do. And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor.
Hi, everybody. I hope you enjoyed that reading of the Declaration of Independence. Show of hands, how many of you have read recently the Declaration, or at all? How many of you heard it read? Right. So what we're going to talk about a little bit, and I hope you'll stay around for this, we'll just have sort of a discussion together, is the context of the Declaration of Independence. Because I'm sure there are things that you think you know that in fact you actually don't know about this document. So the fact is that this document was in fact meant to be read. It was written to be read out loud. And there was a very specific reason for that, other than sort of exciting people to the cause. At the time this document was written, only 30% of the American public wanted revolution. Another 30% were loyal, and the remaining, third, it's actually 33.3 or whatever it is, a third were neutral. They just wanted to see which way the wind would blow. So the idea of a stirring document also had a goal, right, to get people excited. But there's a very particular reason as well, and that is a good portion of the population could not read. So it had to be a document that could be read to them. It had to be short enough to hold somebody's interest, and it had to be, although it doesn't seem like it now, in plain language, so that your average person could understand it. As Kelly said, the Declaration was read out on July 8th at 6 p.m. in Philadelphia, but it was also read out throughout the newly formed United States. George Washington had it read July 9th when he was occupying Manhattan in 1776, the only time the Continental Army held New York City until the end of the war. And it's funny, you'll hear people say, here's just like a little bit of inside baseball for Washington. You'll hear people say Washington read out the Declaration of Independence. He didn't, because he had a very soft and raspy voice, and his voice didn't carry. So he had somebody else read it out to the assembled troops in Lower Manhattan. Other places that the Declaration was read were taverns, public squares. When it was read in New York City on Washington's behalf, what happened there and after was people got so excited, the troops got so excited, that people rushed to what is now Bowling Green, it was called Bowling Green then, and pulled down the statue of King George III. It was a gold-plated statue. You'll see depictions and paintings and plates of this. A piece of the statue is actually at Wilton Historical Society. It was melted down for musket balls and weaponry and so on. I'm gonna pause a minute before I get into the context, because I wanna give everyone an opportunity. Do you have questions about things that you've heard about the Declaration during that period of time that you wanna talk about, or do you want me to just keep talking? I'm sure you don't want me to just keep talking. Anyone have any questions?
If anyone has questions, we will ask that you come over here so that everyone can hear by using the microphone.
I hear somebody.
So I understand that it was not actually signed until August 4th or something like that? Is that
The Declaration.
that correct?
Was it fully signed? Right. So delegates went back home, and so it kind of had to make the rounds to be fully signed. I don't remember the exact day,
Right.
but that's
July
the
4th.
same thing with the Constitution, by the way.
Maybe I misspoke. It could have been, I don't remember now. But it's something, it wasn't until August 4th. It was,
Right. It wasn't right. It was quite a bit later. Yes, that's right. The Constitution, the Declaration of Independence was written by committee. Thomas Jefferson gets all the credit, but in fact, there were 5 people working on this document, right? Robert Livingston, Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, Roger Sherman from Connecticut, John Adams, right? So these were the men who actually worked on it together. Jefferson was the wordsmith. And so what I would encourage you to do is hold up your phones at this QR code, and what you're gonna see is the draft copy of the Declaration of Independence. You'll see all the crossouts. You'll see all the things that didn't make it into the Declaration, a lot of which caused confusion today. So a couple of things I wanna talk about with you today is context. Right? So the Declaration of Independence was a contextual document. It's written in a shorthand on the basis of everybody in that community knew what had been happening over the previous, actually, almost 15 to 20 years after the end of the so-called French and Indian War, the 7 Years' War, right? So does anyone know about this war, remember this war? Right, do you know why it has everything to do with revolution?
But no one else knows.
Okay, no one else knows. So the French and Indian War was a proxy war between Britain and France here on the North American continent. Both England and France together had native allies fighting with each other to basically gain control of the North American continent. It was to pay back the debts of that war that all the tariffs and taxes that we talk about on tea, on paper, right, on rum, molasses, sugar, these so-called intolerable acts, it was for the purpose of paying back this war. The King of England essentially said, we fought this war for you to be able to remain in the United States and expand your reaches and live comfortably, right? And you have to pay it back now. So this had been actually going on since 1764. 12 years before the Declaration of Independence had been signed, there was this kind of political back and forth, right? So let's just think about our own time. Think about the last 12 years, right? If we're all called upon to talk about the things that were major legislation or points of contention in the last 12 years, we could do it. We could talk about it in a shorthand. We wouldn't have to spell it out. And that's what the grievances are in the Declaration of Independence. They're a kind of a shorthand, right? The line, I want to talk about some things in this document that, as Kelly said, or as Jennifer said, have to do with sort of troublesome statements, right? The reference to Native people as Indian savages, right? So that's a very face value sort of statement, right? That, the Native Americans are attacking American colonists at the behests of the King of England, right? Well, it's not exactly quite that, right? What he's really talking about here is something very specific. Yes, he's talking about the loyalty of Native tribes to the King of England and therefore attacking Americans, but there's a very specific reason for it. And the reason is, after the French and Indian War ended, Britain, in return for the allyship of the tribal people, promised that American colonists would not encroach on native lands past the Allegheny Mountains. That was the promise. That was the British law. And the American colonists did not like this. They wanted to go west. They felt this law was unjust. Chief among the people who flouted this law and went west anyway and grabbed lands, anyone want to guess? George Washington, right. So that's what this actually refers to, right? He has endeavored to bring on the inhabitants of our frontiers, the merciless Indian savages, right? So it's using this powerful language to incite people around a moral idea when what he's really talking about is a legal idea. And that's really important to understand, right? Another thing that's often misunderstood is kind of the implication of the quartering of troops, right? You've all heard this. The King of England said that British regulars are going to occupy American cities like Boston, and American households have to take them in, right? You all know that? Well, that's not actually what happened at all, right? So it referred to empty warehouses, empty taverns, commercial properties that could be taken by the crown to quarter soldiers, but not the homes of private residents, unless they wanted to. And then they were compensated, right? I'm just telling you all of this so that you understand the context of this document as a living, breathing document. The other thing I want to tell you is this. The Declaration of Independence was essentially nothing more than a petition. And petitions were very common in colonial America. There started to be petitioning of legislatures in colonial America from as early as 1705, notably by enslaved people petitioning for their freedom. In 1764 in Boston, in response to the so-called Intolerable Acts, the tariffs, 200 Bostonians signed a similar petition to the King of England, saying, we're not going to buy your goods because here's our list of grievances of all the things that you've done. Among those 200 people were women who had buying power. So the Declaration is built on a long legacy of petitioning, and that's what it was meant to be. It was a petition to the king. I would wager that these men knew how important the document was, but I don't think that they ever believed that it would become a sacred document of the Republic. That wasn't their intent. Their intent was to create a practical instrument to petition the king. Two other things I want to talk to you about, and then I'm going to stop. All men are created equal, right? So we talk about this a lot. People often say to me, historians talk about this. Is the Declaration a failed document? All men are created equal, because we live in a world where there is still not equality in our nation. Is it a failed document? And again, this is a nuance. I often say, no, it's not a failed document for this reason, because it did provide equality for who it was meant to provide equality for. It did not pretend to provide equality for anyone other than, somebody tell me who? white men. But I want to tell you that all men are created equal. So those of us who are kind of progressively minded and think about the context of the time, understand that all men are created equal meant white land-holding men at the time, right? Because the idea of suffrage, the ability to vote, be represented in a parliament or a legislature, meant that not only were you white, not only were you a man, not only were you above the age of 25, you had land, right? That's not actually what all men are created equal means. All men are created equal specifically means, and this is the context that everyone in the time knew that has been lost to history, is that all Britons, all subjects of the king, whether they were born in the North American mainland or in England, are created equal. That's what it meant. It was a specific dig at the king about non-representation of the American colonies in Parliament. What they were actually saying was that all men who meet the requirements of suffrage and representation, whether they were British subjects born in Jamaica, Barbados, North America, Canada, or the island of England, are created equal. That's what that meant, very specifically. Right? And again, it was the context. The last thing I'll talk about before, again, answering questions from anybody if you want, how many of you heard the statement that Thomas Jefferson wanted to originally abolish slavery in the Declaration of Independence and was prevented from doing so by the committee? Oh, just a few of you. I have to tell you, I'm actually really glad it's just a few of you, because that's also a misnomer, but it is a thing that is often said, right? That Thomas Jefferson wanted to abolish slavery. He wrote it into the Declaration draft, you can see it, and was voted down, and it wasn't included. I'm going to read the passage to you all. Can I do that? He has waged cruel war against human nature itself, violating its most sacred rights of life and liberty in the persons of a distant people who never offended him, captivating and carrying them into slavery in another hemisphere, or to incur miserable death in their transportation hither. This piratical warfare, the opprobrium of infidel powers, is the warfare of the Christian king of Great Britain, determined to keep open a market where men should be bought and sold. He has prostituted his negative for suppressing every legislative attempt to prohibit or to restrain this execrable commerce. That means he's vetoed all laws to prevent the international slave trade, determining to keep open a market where men should be bought and sold. And this assemblage of horrors might want no fact of distinguished dye. He is now exciting those very people, this is the key part, he is now exciting those very people to rise in arms among us and to purchase that liberty of which he had deprived them by murdering the people upon whom he also obtruded them, thus paying off former crimes committed against the liberties of one people with crimes which he urges them to commit against the lives of another. Do you all understand what he's saying here? Well, first of all, I have to say, he's laying the entire international slave trade at the door of King George III when it actually predated him by some 250 years, right? So again, this is the bombast of the whole thing. So right around the time the Declaration of Independence was signed, a month before, there was a very seminal case in England in the Superior Court that ruled that slavery had to end in England, but not yet in the Crown colonies. And this was a great concern for the colonies because the engine of economy in the Caribbean and North America, including in Connecticut, was enslavement, right? So he's combining two ideas here to try to appeal to, in no small part, some of the abolitionists among the delegates, right? But what he's actually saying is, the King of England has promoted slavery, has gotten us essentially used to it, gotten us dependent on it, and now plans to deny us of this opportunity by turning the people he brought here against us. This was a great concern for George Washington, for Thomas Jefferson, for essentially all of the founders, most of whom were enslavers, right? Why? Does anyone know why? This idea of you're turning them against us? So England was offering freedom in return for fighting in the British Army, right? And it was immediate freedom, right? So these are two proclamations, Dunmore's proclamation and Clinton's Proclamation and a 1775 and 7, right, a 6, 75 and 76. And it said to enslaved men, if you join us, we will make you free immediately, and we will give you crown land here in America if we win, or in another crown colony, right? So this 8,000 men threw off their bondage and joined the British, right? Including 3 men known right here from Westport, Jack Coley, Ishmael Coley, and Jack Hyde, right? And so anyone who lives in Coleytown, their enslaver was the man who ultimately created Coleytown. And they went with the English, and they fought, and they, in fact, ultimately went to Canada when the war ended. That's what he was talking about. He wanted to include that in the original draft. They decided ultimately not to include it, right? It was edited out. And other things are edited out as well. I really encourage you to read it, because the original draft is something of a screed. It's almost maniacal in the urge to get everything in there that was edited out. So I'm going to leave you with this, that the Declaration of Independence was a living document for its time that depended on the people that it affected to really understand the events of their day. And so it could be written in a shorthand that everybody would understand, right? The question I would put to you, to all of us, is, do we demand that the document live up to its spirit of a living document speaking to people in their time and interpret it as such, or do we stick with a strict interpretation based on the words on the page? So I'll stop there. Happy to answer any questions, hear any thoughts. I think somebody's coming to the microphone. Oh. Okay. All right, well, I'm gonna sit down, since I think I've fire hosed you with information that you probably need a minute to take in. So thank you, everybody, for coming tonight.
Okay, thank you, Ramin, that was really enlightening about the document. Thank you all for coming. We have a special surprise for the attendees today. If you'll meet me over at the bench, we have a special limited edition America 250 pin with the logo designed by Mix Burrows. He also designed the town's bicentennial logo that you see on the flags around town. And he does such beautiful work. So this is a special gift to you all for coming out today and hearing this moment of history.